Imagine a creature so fierce and horrifying that Sasquatches run from it. This beast may be known as the Michigan Dogman, but this unnerving, unholy, unnatural creature has been seen all across the US, and unlike Patty, if you come into contact with a Dogman, you better hope it's got a belly full of food or you may have to fill it full of lead. Unfortunately, it truly seems as though there is no way to peacefully encounter a Dogman. Many of us, if not everyone, has heard of Bigfoot or Sasquatch, and the idea of a creature similar to a bipedal gorilla that towers to 7 or 9 feet tall, and even in some accounts even taller, is enough to make any grown man wishing that he had worn his yellow pants. But I'm going to start out this video with a very brief story I heard from one of my favorite podcasts, Sasquatch Chronicles. That being said, this is of course a story of a story, and of course I add on to it to make it a bit more entertaining, but the main point remains resolute. A man was making his way out to the woods to go camping. He drove down a long dirt road until he finally found a place to park. He grabbed his gear and began making his way to a spot he had been many times before. The entire first day, the drive in, the setting up of his campsite, was really ordinary. Nothing odd was going on. No sounds, no knocks, no whoops, no hollers, no shadows out the corner of his eye or anything like that at all. Now, if you've never been hunting or never looked into it, then you should know that if you're planning to use a tree stand or anything really, I suppose, then you need to get out there as soon as possible. When the deer hear your crunching and walking, and then the sound of the tree stand clanking and sticking, they all run away and avoid the sound because they know that whatever it isn't a deer. So the earlier you can get out there and set up your tree stand, the better. So this man makes his way out there and gets up in the tree, and he's waiting for quite a while, around 2 to 3 hours if I remember correctly. So he's setting up in the tree, and he's waiting, relaxing, and just really enjoying nature while waiting for something to show up, except he ended up seeing something he never expected to see. As he's sitting in his tree stand, he hears the sound of something running, and it's moving fast. He grabs his gun, just in case it was a startled bear, knowing just how fast they can scale up trees, but unfortunately for him, it was far worse than a bear. In the same direction of the noise, he sees a large bipedal creature come running out toward the clearing that he was overlooking. It stopped and looked around as though it was looking for something. And like any rational mind, he really just thought this was a person in a suit. So he yells out to the man something to the effect of, "Hey, what are you doing? Stop playing around. You can't be doing that out here." But when this man turns to look at him, he sees skin, facial expressions, and he could tell right away 2 important things. 1, this wasn't a person in a suit. It was real. It had a gorilla-like face, but obviously not a gorilla. And 2, this creature, whatever it was, looked like it was terrified and potentially running for its life. But what could be so horrifying that a Sasquatch would be afraid of it? Well, as the man and the beast stared at each other for a few moments, the creature looked back from where it had just came from and then looked at the man. He said that it made a gesture as if it was telling him to be quiet, or to hide, or to just not move. The man was utterly confused, as you can imagine, and just to play it safe, he decided to do as he was told. So he sat quiet and still. So this creature ran off, and just a minute or two later, a second, larger creature now stood where it just was. This creature had a large upper body with a large snout. It almost appeared like a werewolf, and it was sniffing the air. He felt as though he was safe since he was downwind, but as it sniffed over and over and over again, its snout pointed in his direction. This werewolf-like creature had caught his scent, but luckily for him, a noise had gone off in the direction where the creature had gone, and this second creature ran off. He sat in that tree stand for several hours just to be sure that they were both gone, and like any sensible person, he just went home. Whether this story is true or not, I'll leave for you to decide, but regardless, this isn't the only encounter with the Dogman. So let's get into some of the earlier sightings. We'll get into some encounters, and I'll give you my opinion on what they could be, and I'll show the fairly compelling evidence we have of the Dogman's existence. The first recorded sighting of the Dogman was in the 80s, the 1880s, 1887 to be specific. 2 lumberjacks were out in the woods in Wexford County, Michigan, doing their daily tasks when all of a sudden they saw this large, strange creature. It was said to have the head of a wolf, but with the body in the shape of a man. Aside from this sighting, nothing else is known to have happened, but not everyone would be so lucky. In 1938, a man was fishing along the Muskegon River when he was attacked by a pack of what seemed to all be just a bunch of wild dogs. He was luckily armed and managed to scare them all off when he fired his shotgun in the air, but when he got up and looked around, he saw that one of the dogs wasn't gone. It was seemingly unfazed by the sound and stared at him with a sort of primal hatred. It then went from standing on all fours to standing upright and continued to glare at the fisherman. Afterward, I'm not sure exactly what happened. The account doesn't go into that, but I'd assume the remaining dog just walked away, realizing that it wasn't going to fare well on its own. There's also a legend that has been sort of thrown around just about everywhere in the place called the Land Between the Lakes. I'm not going to go into that in great detail because it's a very long story, but even more importantly, I don't believe the mainstream story is 100% true, but I'll just go over it just in case you're not aware. Family had gone out camping in an RV in the Land Between the Lakes and were attacked by a dogman. The entire family was killed, and it ends with the detectives looking for this little girl who was said to have been hauled up into a tree where her blood dripped down on a suit, which is how they saw her, how they found her. There was also said to be large claw marks on the RV as well. While entertaining for sure, I have to say that unless they were investigating this potential murder in the dark of the night with just flashlights, it's that final detail that makes me feel as though this was just one big dramatic story. If you're walking into a campground, especially one that needs to have enough space for an RV to drive in and then turn around and then out, then there is a lot of open space. And if you're driving into this place, you'll be able to easily see if there's a little girl in a bright dress dangling from a tree. But beyond that, there was a man that came forward saying that he was the survivor of the attack and that there was actually two dogmen, and he managed to shoot one of them. He then hid by pulling himself up into the undercarriage of the RV. It's a really interesting account, so I'll link the video I got that from in the description. He goes on to explain why this whole mainstream story of LBL is just not true and how it's just insulting to the memory of the people. And after this last encounter, we'll go into its appearance and characteristics as well as its behavior and how it seems to act towards humans. Duluth, Wisconsin is a large city with almost 300,000 citizens, so this area isn't a tiny backwards place with uneducated people as is the stigma of towns that embrace nature around them. It's located on Lake Superior and has surrounding hills, forests, and parks that offer a lot of outdoor activities such as hiking, fishing, skiing, and boating. From what it looks like, it seems like a great place to live. Honestly, maybe I should talk to my wife about moving out there. But anyway, this encounter occurred on the edge of this city by a woman that is a graphic designer. Although we don't have her name since she wants to remain anonymous, but for the ease of the story, I'm just going to call her Lily. But what may give you a bit of a chill down your spine is that this encounter wasn't hundreds of years ago or even decades ago, but back in November of 2016. On a dark night on Maple Grove Road, a stretch of road that sits on the peninsula on Lake Superior, Lily was taking care of some chores while in her home alone. Her husband worked late shifts and wouldn't be home for several more hours. She lived in a place where she and her neighbors had a good amount of space between them. It wasn't crowded and cramped, but spaced out decently. As she walked past one of her windows that was wide open, she saw something that shouldn't be real. It was an upright creature running from the edges of where the lampposts of the residential area are able to illuminate before dashing into a field with an antique-style barn. Lily was petrified at the sight of this thing and continued watching the monster move around the field, till she saw a passing pair of headlights illuminate behind it, bringing into focus the creature's silhouette much more clearly. Once she got a good look at this thing, she didn't feel safe staying home alone with this giant monster in the field next to her house. So she drove to a very well-lit gas station and waited for her husband to come home. Once he got there, he didn't see anything, and I don't think any loving woman would be willing to send her husband to the field to check it out, so that's where this encounter ended, but the feelings it gave her stayed for quite a bit longer. She said the fear was an overwhelming, downright supernatural fear that pressed on her like a thick black sludge. When she described the monster, she said that it was probably 7 feet tall if it was standing on 2 feet rather than running on all fours as she saw it. Its back was abnormally hunched and moved awkwardly, almost as though it was stiff, as if it were walking on its haunches like a gorilla. And you may think that this whole thing ends there and she's just left to deal with the crippling knowledge of some unknown, unnatural beast running about in the area near her home, but in a bittersweet kind of way, she wasn't alone. She went and talked to her family about this creature she had seen, and that caused her own sister to fess up to having seen the same hunched-like beast years ago. She had seen it standing at the edge of her property, and that's all it did. It didn't run, it didn't bark, it didn't howl or even growl. It just stood there staring into her home with piercing red eyes. And I could honestly go on and on telling you about people's encounters with this thing. This sadly isn't a rare account. These Dogman monsters, while elusive, are not as standoffish as a traditional Sasquatch. In fact, sometimes it seems to seek out conflict. So let's get into what these beasts are said to look like, their behavior, their temperament, and overall demeanor. It's not difficult to surmise that these beasts are hostile and not in any way friendly, but before that, what are they supposed to look like? Well, this may be the shortest section of all my videos when it comes to describing a monster because it is essentially indiscernible from a werewolf. It has a dog head, human-like shaped torso with arms and hand-like appendages, with legs that have what's called a hock, like a dog. It's that part of their hind legs that looks like it's bending backwards. As far as size, they're typically anywhere between 6 to 9 feet tall, which I'm sure varies based on climate and gender. If it's in any way related to wolves, then typically the males are larger than the females. And as a side note, that story I told earlier can mean that the smaller Bigfoot-like creature may have been a female Sasquatch running from a male Dogman. As for the color of their coat, just about anything that shows up in wolves is what these things can end up being. Black, white, gray, brown, reddish, and possibly even multicolored as well. It's honestly not hard to know when you're looking at a Dogman. If you're looking at a creature you would describe as a werewolf, then it's probably a Dogman. And this is just an opinion, but what if this is where the legends of werewolves actually comes from? A man goes into the woods, gets got by a Dogman comes out, and people believe that the man went in as a man and came out as this creature, but that's just a guess. I'll have to do a separate video on werewolves to look more into this. But as for their behavior, they seem to act very, very hostile, as we can tell from the last encounter where this creature was just staring into this woman's home. I don't know about you guys, but when I'm staring at something, it's usually wings, popcorn, or the Uber driver when they're walking up to my door with my food. Call me fat, whatever. The point is that when animals stare, not people, but animals, it's usually because they either feel a sense of fear or a threatening presence from whatever it is that they're staring at, or because they're inviting conflict from whatever they're staring towards. This Dogman staring into this woman's house was it scoping out a potential meal. It wanted her to come outside. It's wanted to go inside the home and devour her, and as terrifying as that might be, not knowing these things are out there and being caught by surprise is even more terrifying. Another example of hostility is the story of the Land Between the Lakes. Whether version 1, 2, 3, or 5,000 is accurate to what really happened, every version talks about it being the aggressor and making the move towards its prey. And even in the story in which the fisherman was attacked by the pack of dogs, the Dogman at the end stood up and stared into the man's eyes. And I don't think it was doing this because it was falling in love. It was obviously ticked off that this man was armed, and it knew that if it charged at him, it was not going to walk away. There's countless other stories of people encountering Dogman-like creatures, and before they see or hear it, they typically smell it. They smell an extremely pungent odor of urine. And if you're not aware, urine in the animal kingdom is a way of marking your property, your land, your domain, your home. These creatures aren't creating this dirty must because they want you to feel invited. They're doing this to let you know, hey, this is my territory, you need to leave. There's story after story after story of the Dogman charging people, making bluff charges, and creating this urine-type odor. They're not friendly by any means. They can't be reasoned with, they can't be convinced of anything, and they can't be befriended, although I wonder if you managed to steal a pup and raise it as your own, if it would be trustworthy. I don't know if that's a possibility, but what do you think? If a Dogman pup was taken from its home and raised as a pet, or perhaps even an equal, would it be something that you could trust? Let me know down in the comments. Okay, so we understand what they look like and their temperament, so let's get into what I believe they could possibly be, and then we'll see what investigations are being done concerning the Dogman. Lastly, we'll look at the evidence of their existence. No more stories and he said, she said accounts, but what many people believe to be actual photos of the Dogman. But first, if you've had an encounter with a creature of folklore and you want your story told, please send me your story in the fullest details possible at my email. I'll read through them to make sure that only those that have a serious encounter are talked about, so you don't have to worry about anyone being made fun of. And I'll also be reading them on my channel. This isn't just restricted to Bigfoot or Dogman stories, but all are welcomed. If you've seen little people, odd flying dinosaur-like creatures, or anything at all out of the norm, please send me an email, and if you'd like to remain anonymous, just let me know and I'll keep it all under wraps. It's easy to feel secluded when you've experienced something out of the ordinary, but trust me, you're not alone. With so much information on Bigfoot and Sasquatch type creatures, it's extremely easy to lump these creatures together and say that they're one and the same. I mean, they're both covered in fur, they're both large and terrifying creatures that live in the woods and are extremely elusive as well as highly intelligent. So are these two species part of the same branch of biology? No, I really don't think so. Could they somehow be related? Maybe extremely distantly as much as cats and dogs, but ultimately I really think that these are species all their own. The biggest indicator of this would be the hawk that the Dogman is known to have. So whatever this creature is, it is undoubtedly not a Sasquatch. I used to think that it was and rationalize it to myself by saying that Dogman to Sasquatch is like a mandrill to a gorilla, but the difference between mandrills and gorillas are fairly obvious, but their skeletal structure is just about identical. There's also some belief that these Dogman sightings are actually proof of the presence of skinwalkers. For those of you that don't know, skinwalkers are a form of magic practitioner with the Navajo belief system that use a very dark form of magic. They're not animals or beasts, but humans that practice this dark art, in which they take the shape of their selected animal. In order to do so, they need to have the literal skin of the animal that they're going to become, hence the name Skinwalker. However, according to one of the channels that I watch, where I believe this gentleman has quite a bit of inside knowledge about skinwalkers, and if I remember correctly, he's actually gone out and hunted skinwalkers. According to him, the magic they use is sort of bound to their respective area, but he also sees the possibility that a skinwalker may be able to transform in another place outside of where they're said to be, but it's highly unlikely. Almost like flipping a quarter 20 times and expecting it to land on heads every time. It's possible, but not likely. He's a really interesting guy, and I hold his opinion and the information he brings to the table in extremely high regard, so I'll link one of his videos about skinwalkers in the description. So if these Dogmen are not skinwalkers and they're not related to Sasquatch, what could they be? Well, that's what makes this so much more unsettling than a typical cryptid. The Chupacabra could be an extraterrestrial, the Jersey Devil could be an evil spirit, and Bigfoot could be a Gigantopithecus, but the Dogman, I'm not entirely sure. Whatever they are, they've been here just as long as the Sasquatch. We know what this creature is not, but it's almost impossible to say what it is. And I mean, I know some people will say that they're just werewolves, but if we're going by what werewolves are based on traditional stories, they only appear during a full moon. And during that last encounter where Lily had seen a Dogman, it was on the 5th of November, I believe. And during the entirety of that first week of November, there was not a single full moon at all. So it can't possibly be that. Whatever this is, it's something quite unsettling and unnatural, at least by typical standards of what animals are supposed to look and act like. When it comes to official companies, agencies, or institutions of any sort researching or looking into the existence of Dogmen, it's been extremely empty. While some episodes of Monster Quest momentarily go out and look for signs or interview individuals that have encountered Dogmen, there's basically nothing being done to prove its existence. I was speaking with someone on Patreon recently about potentially going out and looking for the Alabama White Thing and how the investigation would really need to be done in order to find some of these things. If we really want to find some of these creatures, not just Dogmen, but cryptids of all sorts, including Sasquatch, Pukwudgies, pterosaurs, the skunk ape, just about any unknown creatures, it all truly requires a small team of bloggers. We don't need a large group of videographers, sound guys, producers, actors, trail guides, and health and safety members all tramping through the forest. When you have these large production teams, you have at least one actor, one navigator, one camera guy, one sound guy, one safety guy, and potentially someone in charge of the entire shoot to make sure that the content they plan on making actually gets made. At a minimum, you have 6 people all walking through the woods, making noises, constantly talking back and forth all day and all night, and I highly doubt all 6 of them decided to shower with scent-blocking soap, scent-blocking shampoo, spray themselves down with scent-blocking body spray with camouflage. These episodes, while incredibly fun to watch, are the equivalent of a child going outside in his backyard looking for buried treasure. You have a better chance of winning the lottery than they do of finding something. If we want to find the Dogman, which I honestly don't think I would want to, you would need a small team of 2 to 3 people to quietly make their way out as though they were hunting. That means hiding your scent, hiding yourself, of course, and then patiently, quietly waiting for hours and hours on end. And then you would have to do this for at least a minimum of a week straight. 2 weeks would be best, but it wouldn't be easy. Even if you did see something, you would need to have a GoPro camera running at all times so you don't miss anything. And you know, a while ago, I did a video on La Lechuza, which is a Mexican owl witch, and during the video, a deer runs right behind me. Had my camera not been rolling at that time, I would have missed it and not gotten anything at all. So you would need a small team acting as though they were hunters with cameras constantly rolling and to spend more than a couple of days out in the woods. But as of right now, there is not a single company or entity that we know of doing this in the hopes of finding the Dogman. When you go out looking for photos or videos, they're always extremely blurry and just about useless. The majority can just be summed up to being anthropomorphism. 2 dots on some jagged wood can easily be seen as a dogman, especially considering the majority of people nowadays have trouble seeing far away versus before computers and phones where most people had trouble seeing up close. So the things I'm going to bring to you are just some pieces of evidence out there. And as per usual, I'm not saying that these are real, nor am I saying that they're fake. I'll give my opinion on them, but ultimately the choice of whether or not to believe is entirely up to you. The first one comes from Australia. That's right, they have the world's deadliest spiders, snakes, and now dogmen. A man named John came forward on a podcast stating that this creature was stalking him, and this is the photo that came with that story. Admittedly, this could be anthropomorphism in which a non-human object is given human characteristics, but what do you think? Dogman or coincidence? This next one is just a piece of audio that was recorded after a couple crashed their car while avoiding something that they described as looking like a great big dog standing up.
Star Emergency, this is Kyle speaking. How can I help you? Hello?
Something just ran in front of us on the road. We're in the ditch. We rolled over.
How many people are in the car, and is anyone injured?
There's 2 of us. I don't think we have any injuries.
Is the car on its top or wheels or what?
No, it's kind of sitting on its side.
Hold one moment, please, while I contact emergency services.
Okay.
Okay, the state police should be on their way in a few minutes. Is everyone still okay?
Yeah, I think we're okay.
What ran in front of you? A deer?
I don't know what the hell it was, but it was big. It looked like a great big dog. Standing up.
Was it a bear, maybe?
Maybe. Oh my God. Oh my God.
Sir? Hello? Are you still there? Sir?
While the most odd part about this is how rehearsed the OnStar associate sounds, it could be that he was attempting to keep the couple calm while help arrived. Who this was and whether or not this was a hoax is ultimately unknown. This one here is simply a photo taken from an unknown man's grandfather and has called it his cryptid photo. While this does look like fairly compelling evidence, nearly all of the comments are in complete disbelief. What do you think? This next photo is my personal favorite, and when it comes to the story, I only found a TikTok video saying that this was taken from the back seat of a car in Colorado. Nothing else is known, at least not by me. If you have more information about this one, let me know, because for me it's just extremely compelling. And while there's plenty of non-believers that say that there would be more photos of these things if they were real, I'm going to show you everything that I found after about a 30-minute search. Of course, they may not all be real or even believable, but it's important that we remember that we don't need 10,000 real photographs for this creature to exist. We just need one. Let me know which one is your favorite and the most convincing to you in the comments. And lastly, the final piece of evidence is something you'll have to do on your own time to really understand it. If you go down this road, you have to realize that there's no coming back from it. This could potentially change the way you look at the woods entirely. I know it's affected me for sure, but just go onto YouTube, look up podcasts, and just listen to people's encounter stories. The ones where they have people actually talking about their account and what happened to them. At first, it'll really just be for entertainment, and you'll probably just enjoy listening to their stories, but after hours upon hours upon hours of listening to dozens and dozens of accounts by all different people from various walks of life, you'll start to realize that all of these people can't all possibly be this good at acting. Every so often, you'll come across some people that are just obviously lying, but there are hundreds and hundreds of stories of people seeing these things. And for me, so many people coming forward with their stories is one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the Dogman's existence. I used to be completely against this thing being real, but now I think I'm a believer. If you like what I do and you want to help support the channel, then the best way to do that is by joining the community on Patreon. I post my scripts and videos early, and I've even done a few videos that you can only find on Patreon. But if you're not into that, then just check out this video that YouTube seems to think you'll love, and I'll see you there.